Time for the WMUR Noonday News reporter, Tom Power, with a complete roundup of world, national, and local news based on reports from the Union Leader and United Press. Here's Tom with the headlines direct from the Union Leader newsroom.
Good afternoon. 2 air crashes heading up the news today. One in Seattle, Washington, where 27 persons died in the crash of an unscheduled airliner. Another crash in Nevada, 14 persons presumed dead there. Here in Manchester, the trial of Walter Burke, Jr., the self-confessed slayer of Patty Burke, will begin on December 5th, and the state CIO convention opened here in Manchester this morning with labor leaders blasting in the new law that prohibits unions from making political contributions. Those today's top stories. Let's look at details. 27 persons have been killed in the crash of an unscheduled airliner near Seattle, Washington. The 4-engine plane with 74 persons aboard exploded and slammed into a house shortly after it took off from Boeing Field. There were 47 survivors. The survivors included a mother and 5 children who were in the house. The plane was carrying 66 soldiers returning from duty in the Far East. One of them, PFC Robert Fisher, says the plane engine began acting up shortly after the takeoff. Then he says it made a weird sound. There was a flash. He adds, "I don't think we'd flown more than a mile." The plane, owned by the Peninsula Air Transport Company, hit 2 trees, then crashed into a house just a short distance from a big shopping center. Several of the passengers say an explosion preceded the crash, and officials already are investigating the possibility of sabotage. At least 5 New Englanders survived the crash at Seattle. They are Corporal Robert Oberg of Waltham, Massachusetts, Master Sergeant Michael Guerra of Waterbury, Connecticut, PFC Gary Ricker of Yarmouth, Maine, PFC David Kent of Newburyport, Massachusetts, and Specialist Kenneth Upstrom of Worcester. Meanwhile, another crash in Nevada today. Air and ground rescue teams are trying to reach the wreckage of an Air Force transport plane that crashed in Nevada with 14 persons aboard. Officials say the plane was carrying Air Force personnel and some civilian consultants when it cracked up on Mount Charleston, some 115 miles northwest of Las Vegas. The plane was believed to be headed for a super-secret atomic base in the Nevada Proving Grounds. All aboard are presumed dead. An Army rescue team set out for the peak this morning, and the Air Force planned to drop parachute medics at the scene of the crash. Here in New Hampshire, at Nashua, Superior Court Justice William Grimes today set Monday, December 5th, as the date for the first-degree murder trial of Walter Burke, Jr., 17-year-old Manchester youth charged with the slaying of 4-year-old Patsy Johnson last July 6th. The trial will take place at the Manchester Courthouse, the Superior Court, according to Arthur S. Healy, Clerk of Court, and an additional 75 jurors have been called for the case. Burke, who has been in the county jail in Manchester since the slaying, will be represented in court by attorney James B. Broderick, Jr. of Manchester and William H. Craig of the Manchester law firm of Craig & Craig. The accused murderer, a resident of 174 Douglas Street, will be prosecuted by State Attorney General Louis C. Wyman and County Solicitor Conrad Deney. Manchester, a double-barreled blast at the state's Corrupt Practices Act marked the opening session here today of the 13th annual and possibly the last state CIO convention. They say possibly the last because the CIO and the AFL are very close to a merger now. First to tee off on the new statute this morning, which prohibits labor unions from contributing to the candidates of their choice, was Mayor Josephat T. Benoit. On hand at the Carpenter this morning to give the address of welcome at the 3-day parley, the city's chief executive asked, when a lobbyist is paid $10,000 or $15,000 to get a bill through the legislature, why shouldn't organized labor be able to do something for a candidate? He added, today's candidate has to be the most handsome or the wealthiest, unless he passes a tin cup among his friends. President Thomas Pateras of the CIO accused the legislature of slipping through the law. He said only candidates of great wealth can now seek office. He called the bill unconstitutional in every sense of the word. The CIO president foresaw prohibition of freedom of speech of candidates who did not have the money if the present logic of the law is carried out. Pateras said the present Republican administration, together with big business, has felt the power of labor. He said both can't see labor in politics. In referring to other matters, President Pateras this morning charged that many New Hampshire legislators connived to set the minimum wage law at 65 or 70 cents an hour instead of the established 75 cents. The CIO official said the present minimum wage law of 75 cents is meager. Mr. Pateras declared he would like to put legislators on a $30 a week budget and see how they would like it. The Taft-Hartley law and the so-called right to work proposal were termed vicious and anti-labor by the Speaker in his opening address this morning. More than 175 delegates were on hand at the Carpenter as the convention opened. It will run for 2 days. Manchester, the names of 2 New Hampshire residents are listed on a presidential preference ballot poll being taken at that state CIO convention. The ballot is distributed by the Political Action Committee of the National CIO and seeks the answer to the question, what your presidential preference would be in the New Hampshire primary in March of '56. Republicans are asked, if Eisenhower is not a candidate, then what would your preference be? On the GOP lineup are the names of Senator Stiles Bridges and Presidential Assistant Sherman Adams. Other GOP names include Chief Justice Warren, Senator Nolan, and Vice President Nixon. Under the Democratic column are Adlai Stevenson, Senator Kefauver, and Averell Harriman. A national PAC official, Henry Murray, said a tally of the poll would not be made public. Manchester checks for the 84 ballot inspectors and the 14 moderators who worked at the polls at the municipal elections last week are now ready at the office of City Treasurer James B. Bourne. Each ballot inspector and each moderator receives $25 for his day's work, which starts by getting the ballot boxes at the city clerk's office at 5:30 in the morning and ends after the ballots have been counted and returned to the city clerk's office in the evening. Ward officials, consisting of 3 selectmen and a clerk for each ward, are paid on an annual basis. The selectmen each receive $57.50 a year. Ward clerks are paid $65 a year. Manchester Executive Councilor Romeo Champagne of Manchester says a lot of state money is wasted at the end of the fiscal year. The Democrat charges today that some state officials indulge in excess buying rather than return unused money to the state treasury. Champagne says the state doesn't need a broad-based tax or a stock-and-trade tax, just the elimination of the month of June. He said he shuddered at what he called the utter disregard for sound business principles and ethics on the part of some of our state business chiefs. Referring to the elimination of the month of June, Mr. Champagne explained that he knows some state agencies, having money left over in their appropriations, spend it all up in the month of June rather than return it to the Treasury. New Hampshire suffered another highway fatality last night. A Walpole, New Hampshire woman was killed in a highway mishap on Route 123 at Drewsville. 55-year-old Mrs. Bernice Dana apparently skidded on an icy curve and was pinned under her automobile. Over in Keene, defeated Keene Mayor Lawrence Pickett has asked for a recount of votes. In the election November 8th, Pickett made the demand at a meeting of the Keene City Council last night. He lost in the election to J. Alfred Dennis by 238 votes. Concord, a study report suggests that the oversized New Hampshire House be reduced to about 250 members. There are now 400. This would still leave the lawmaking body more than twice the size of the average state House of Representatives in the country. The suggestion was offered by the Public Administration Service at the University of New Hampshire. The study said that experience shows that an unduly large legislature tends to be unwieldy, inefficient, and vulnerable to organized pressure. Gilmanton police are holding 2 men in connection with 6 breaks at Tamworth and Sandwich. The men are Guy Cochran, 29 of Meredith, and George Wyatt, 28 of Lakeport. Both are being held in $500 bail for Superior Court action. Back in just a moment with the weather forecast and the remainder of the news.
When buying jewelry, visit someone who knows fine craftsmanship and expert quality. Visit Charles Lucasavi, well-known Manchester young man, at his store, Charles Jewelry at 155 Hanover Street, Manchester. Now, if that special someone's birthday is due, the ideal gift is a birthstone ring from Charles Jewelry. You'll find that Charles has an elegant selection of beautiful birthstones, stones that will make her eyes glow with happiness. And if wedding bells are to be ringing soon, purchase a wedding band that will be cherished forever. Charles has a stunning array of delicately carved and plain wedding bands that will truly be cherished for a lifetime. Charles also features the world-famous Continental Geneva watches, along with Bulova, Hamilton, and other famous makes. And Charles guarantees fine watch repairing. All watches are electronically timed. So friends, make it a point to stop at Charles Jewelry, 155 Hanover Street, Manchester. Now, here's the weather.
Partly cloudy, continued cold and windy this afternoon with a few snow flurries over the higher elevations. Windy tonight and somewhat colder than last night. Tomorrow, fair and continued cold. Present Manchester temperature is 40 degrees. The stock market report further moves toward tighter credit in the form of higher rediscount rates, sent stocks lower today in moderately active trading on the New York Stock Exchange. At 11 o'clock, the Dow Jones Stock Averages showed industrials down 335, rails down $1.20, utilities down 37 cents, and stocks down $1.18. Sales totaled 530,000 shares. Manchester Maternity Hospitals report 5 births today. At Elliott, one of WMUR-TV's announcers is the proud father of a boy today, a son born to Mr. and Mrs. Lucian Dumont of 64 Cohas Avenue at the Elliott Hospital. Lou, you've seen on WMUR-TV. You may pick him up on WMUR Radio Sunday nights when he announces. An 8.5-pound boy, and our congratulations to one of our colleagues. At Moore General, to Mr. and Mrs. David Miller of Goffstown, a girl. At Notre Dame, to the Roland Vignos of 67 Caldwell Avenue, a boy. To Mr. and Mrs. Paul Duval of 481 Hall Street, a girl. To Mr. and Mrs. Paul Dubois of 78 Bedford Street, a boy. White River Junction, Vermont. An investigation is underway into the death of a Lebanon, New Hampshire man whose body was found last night in a blood-spattered apartment at White River Junction. The victim, identified by police as Stanley Longever, about 55. Lebanon police said Longever had been shot, but state authorities declined to confirm the report. An autopsy has been scheduled for today. In Lexington, Massachusetts, a 57-year-old Lexington woman is quoted as saying she killed her brother rather than see him go to a mental institution. Police Chief John Rycroft said Mrs. Ruth Van Norden made the statement from a hospital bed where she's recovering from self-inflicted slash wounds. Her brother, an unemployed engineer, was found shot to death Wednesday in his bed. Mrs. Van Norden was found nearby, unconscious on the floor. The dead man, 58-year-old Frederick Britton, was ill and despondent, according to his sister. She said he had not left his room for several weeks. He lost a job with the Worcester advertising firm last summer. Another busy day is in store for the president today. He has a full appointment book. The visiting list includes Louis Strauss, chief of the Atomic Energy Commission, Dylan Anderson, presidential assistant on national security matters, General Alfred Grunter, the NATO chief, and Secretary of State Dulles. Grunter, an old friend of the president's, will spend the weekend at Mr. Eisenhower's Gettysburg farm. The nation's farmers will lose more than $1 billion this year. The Agriculture Department predicts that the taxable net income of farmers for 1955 will be about $10,600 million, down $1,200 million from 1954. And the department adds the prospects for next year are no brighter. The department says the farmer is caught in a price squeeze. It reports cash receipts are down and prices are up. The department says it seems unlikely the situation will change for the better in '56. However, the department says it can't make allowance for additional farm programs that might be created next year to relieve the situation. And that's the news today. Tom Power reporting.
Listen each day at 12:15 for Tom Power, your noonday news reporter, broadcasting direct from the Union Leader newsroom. For complete details of today's news, read the Union Leader. Next newscast, Paul Harvey at 1 o'clock.